Welcome, everyone.
Awesome. Glad people can join in. All right. Don, do you want to take point on this?
Yeah, sure thing. And I'll ask Issa to add anything as well. But I think we're excited to be joined by Paul from the Edge team, as they've been just today announcing their support for HBAR as part of the wallet. So hopefully we'll have a good conversation today, learning a little bit about how users can leverage HBAR from that software, but also learn a bit about how you all think about the space and take community questions.
Yeah. Sounds great. Definitely looking forward. And definitely, people, if you guys have any questions in the middle of us chatting, feel free to chime in. We've got Issa here moderating, so she can kind of do a quick interruption, let us know what question you have, and we'll fire away with our best answers.
Great. And maybe I'll just quickly introduce myself as well. And then, Paul, I think it would be great if you could do the same. So I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for the HBAR Foundation. We're a group that was just recently set up to really support the adoption of Hedera and HBAR in the cryptocurrency space as a whole, driving awareness from both a retail perspective, as well as continuing Hedera's strong usage in the enterprise space. I think we're really excited, especially by this Edge wallet support, given some of their focus on how to improve a user experience, make crypto accessible to a far larger set of users. So really eager for the conversation today. So with that, I'll pass it over to you, Paul.
Yeah, so my name is Paul Puey. I'm CEO and co-founder of Edge. We're kind of an older startup in the cryptocurrency space. Been around since 2014, originally with a focus on payments on Bitcoin, really wanting to make cryptocurrency more than just, that store of value, which we know it is, but also a payment mechanism, actually making crypto utilized by the ecosystem, by people, and help grow cryptocurrency in that means. We did pivot in 2018 and formed Edge. So our company originally was called Airbits to a lot of early Bitcoin fans, and now we're Edge with a focus on still making cryptocurrency easy, but instead of payments, allowing people to buy, sell, and trade and hold their own crypto. So self-custody has always been a big focus of Edge, and making self-custody easy and familiar to people so they don't have to deal with a lot of the alienating processes of key management and backup. We had really simplified key management in Airbits. We've carried that over to Edge. And now we're multi-asset. We support many of the different top 20 cryptocurrencies, as well as many beyond that as well. And we fundamentally believe that crypto's at still an early phase, and we really welcome the experimentation of different consensus mechanisms, methods of use, payment protocols, all the different things that we're seeing in the cryptocurrency space excite me, both everything from smart contracts to performance enhancements and scalability enhancements, and hence the reason why we're excited to get HBAR on board, because they're kind of the team and the protocol are treading new ground in really trying to push the limits of scaling, with the hope of still being able to achieve a lot of the benefits that Bitcoin was aimed to achieve, with censorship resistance and being globally accessible.
Excellent. Well, thanks for that introduction, Paul. And certainly, it's always fascinating to work with companies who've been in the space for quite a while as well, and seeing some of those iterations. I'd love maybe just to get a bit of your perspective on the payments landscape. Where are you seeing growth in your user base from a payments perspective, asset perspective, or just general user perspective?
Yeah, so I hate to say it, but one of the reasons we pivoted is that payments just wasn't a use case that people cared about back in, at least at the time, 2015, 2016. And unfortunately, a lot of that had to do with kind of multiple avenues, both the scalability of Bitcoin at the time, since we were focused only on Bitcoin, fees started going up, people were really concerned. The rhetoric of what cryptocurrency was designed for, the rhetoric started to change from being, it's a utility-based currency to replace cash, to replace payments, to being just purely a store of value, which once again, I don't argue with the fact that it's an incredible store of value, both Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, but you kind of need the complete picture. And I'm really excited to see cryptos that focus on the complete picture. So right now, with respect to payments, ironically, most of the most successful companies are those that enable you to spend your fiat and then get rewarded in cryptocurrency because of that store of value narrative. Where we do see use case of payments are where payments are highly, highly frictioned, where the fees that are imparted on blockchains that are expensive don't matter as much because you're doing things like crossing borders, right? Whenever you're trying to replace like a wire transfer or a Western Union where fees are pretty high, suddenly cryptocurrency gets competitive when it comes to buying a cup of coffee or even buying, even $100 items. Fees can be pretty high. Now, I do think that there are new blockchains, obviously, Hedera being one of them, that really help scale with fees. Now it comes the other challenge, which is getting adoption where people that own the cryptocurrency actually want to use it. So I think the next challenge is motivating people to do so, give them rewards for doing so. You're saving merchants money by not using credit cards and other typical payment mechanisms. Even cash costs merchants money. People don't realize this, but cash is not free to receive. Just counting cash and in large quantities depositing it into banks can actually cost quite a bit in labor and whatnot. So getting payment systems integrated with cryptocurrency, stuff that people are already used to using, like the Square terminals or the, the Clover terminals that people see, getting those integrated with crypto would probably be the next big step. And once we see that, it can be pretty widely adopted. So hopefully, I'm not sure, actually, a question for you guys over at the HBAR Foundation, since you're focused on adoption, where has been the focus on trying to get HBAR adopted on a utility mechanism, like actually use case of the cryptocurrency? Right now, obviously, speculation is important. People need to acquire it, increase its value. But then once you start hitting the utility landscape, what's the angle been and how has the reception been as far as utility of the currency?
So I think what we see as our vision for the world, both in the cryptocurrency space as a whole, but certainly built on and enabled with the Hedera network, is essentially this mechanism by which people can engage directly with one another in commerce, in social activity, in really any mechanism of engagement that they want to choose. And payments, I think, as you mentioned, certainly was one that was the original vision of the Bitcoin white paper, but is really just the tip of the spear for how that engagement can be done. So what we've seen pretty quickly is that people recognize that vision. How do you have the ability to frictionlessly engage across borders, across jurisdictions with anybody in your community? But how can you do that in a way that's, performant, cost effective, and also sustainable? So maybe I'll just touch on each of those quickly.
Yes. Love to hear that.
We need to have technologies from the get-go that can support thousands or tens of thousands of transactions per second. That's really what we saw as the core differentiator early on for Hedera, because it could support those types of use cases. As a result, the network saw adoption from companies like AdStacks, who are doing things like digital ad transparency, which are, as we know, anytime we open up a web page, incredibly high volume and needing that level of performance. But that next question around how do you deliver that in a cost model that's effective is just as, if not more critical than the overall performance. So having transaction fees that are fixed in US dollar as a fraction of a penny means that you can have anything from a cross-border payment solution to a micropayment solution to pay for a specific piece of media or piece of content that is scalable, yes, but economic as well. But where I think I've seen a lot of the industry move in the last 6 months is on that last topic of how do we do both of those things, deliver performance and cost effectiveness, but do so sustainably. And that's where it's important from a Hedera operating footprint perspective that we are consuming an incredibly low amount of energy on a per transaction basis. We've had a few studies that are done by community members that demonstrate how it's more efficient than things like Bitcoin and Ethereum, but also payment systems like Visa. And that's a core driver for a lot of organizations who are looking at innovation. How do they continue to build? But more importantly, looking at sustainable innovation of how they do so in a way that doesn't expand their carbon footprint. And it is a way that's really supportive of sustainability long term. But, with that being said, now turning to your question around utility of HBAR, that's really what's been most exciting about Hedera's growth story so far, is that what's driven that demand, both for the network services and in terms of usage of that token, really is those use cases that are thinking about scale from day one. how do I re-architect a payment system or a central bank digital currency or a digital ad system so that it can not only benefit from this new technology, but do so scalably over time, which we've seen as, albeit a bit slower of a burn, a really exciting demonstration of the long-term value this technology provides. But that being said, especially here at the HBAR Foundation, as we're looking towards the growth opportunities in the ecosystem, we're seeing increasing demand from retail users, from DeFi applications, and that's certainly something that's just as exciting for us as well.
Got it. With that, I'd love to kind of ask a few questions that I think I'm going to play slightly, like the devil's advocate, because I'm sure there's going to be listeners that say, well, okay, why HBAR? There's many different other protocols that claim speed and performance, and mostly there's always a trade-off, right? And I accept that, and I don't think trade-offs are bad. I think they're worth experimenting as to whether or not the trade-off you take in one angle is worth the benefit you get in another angle. So one of my understandings of HBAR, maybe you can help describe this a little bit better, are the known validators in the ecosystem, which are the ones that incur a lot of the work of validating transactions, securing the network. And how does Hedera deem the requirement of kind of decentralization in order to achieve, some of the similar goals of cryptocurrency of being globally accessible? So being globally accessible means that you have to have some level of censorship resistance, because otherwise pockets of the world will say, let's just shut it down. How does Hedera and the HBAR network achieve that level of global accessibility with a limited validator set? So how do you feel like that validator set is enough to achieve that level of global accessibility?
Yeah, great question. So when I really first introduce people to Hedera, I like to talk about those two components of technology and the second component of governance. So Hedera is really novel in that actual organization is a multi-member LLC comprised of organizations who are called the Hedera Governing Council members. So that entity is really what governs and today operates the Hedera mainnet and leveraging the HBAR token. So the Governing Council members are intentionally from a diverse set of industries, geographies, sizes, and regulatory backgrounds, because the model is designed to support those organizations having a driving force in requirements, in improvements of the network, but doing so in a distributed manner. So what that means is you actually have nodes today that are operated across the globe in multiple cloud providers, in multiple regulatory jurisdictions, and in some cases can ultimately be more decentralized than other fully public node operation models. We see today, for instance, sometimes whole countries come offline from a crypto network because of a change in regulatory stance. And with the council, you ensure that there isn't that over-concentration of even regulatory control in a specific jurisdiction. But all of that being said, it's meant to be a journey of decentralization. So today the nodes are operated by the council members, but we think, and we've seen this in Hedera's roadmap, that they'll plan to onboard additional community node operators over time to further that decentralization.
Got it. So say, you're one of the people listening in on this Twitter Spaces stream right now, and you say, hey, I want to become one of the node operators and help contribute to the network and validate transactions. What would be the process, you think, maybe if not now, in the future, that someone would go through to help contribute?
Absolutely. So I think first and foremost, we definitely would just encourage you to participate in the ecosystem, by creating an account, getting some HBAR, and trying out some of the different applications. We're seeing things like Galaxy, for instance, in the social space, driving adoption of social tokens, or companies like TuneFM in the music streaming. Real applications that are deployed and can be used, by individuals who are just getting familiar with the technology. But from then on, if you want to become an operator, starting to support the network from an infrastructure perspective, right now, Hedera has open source code to do things like operate a mirror node, which is kind of like a read-only mainnet node where you can validate and store transaction information from the network. And long term, that same model would likely be available for node operation, where maybe you get KYC'd and run a mainnet node itself, or in the future, maybe that's even more permissionless. So it's certainly something that you can start today just by joining the network, trying out some of these exciting applications. You can also start to operate the infrastructure, and those opportunities, I think, will only grow in the future.
Got it. Okay, so it's good to know. That's definitely one thing that a lot of people come up to me about whenever they say, hey, what is the purpose of this blockchain? How does it differentiate? How are the validators decentralized enough? And I honestly don't like the word decentralized or decentralization because it's ambiguous. You don't know whether or not something is or is not. Is it enough? And really, I'm all about the end goal. And the end goal being, hey, let's make a financial network that is globally accessible by anyone with an internet connection. And, this is definitely an attempt that HBAR is making along with, hundreds of other currencies, but with a very different and unique architecture. And let's actually kind of talk about that. The unique architecture being, it's not a blockchain. So everyone talks about blockchain technology being like one of the key buzzwords. And HBAR is definitely not that. Can you give, other listeners a bit of an idea how the technology of HBAR and its consensus mechanism differs from your typical Bitcoin and Ethereum?
Absolutely. So the core innovation that really spawned the creation of the Hedera network was the invention of something called the Hashgraph consensus algorithm. Now, this is a novel consensus algorithm, which is what's called asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerant, or ABFT, which is really the gold standard of distributed consensus and computing. At a high level, how that consensus algorithm works is you have nodes who are voting on the order of transactions and validity of transactions, and they use two core innovations in order to process those transactions with greater efficiency and performance than other algorithms. One is what's called gossip about gossip, and the second is virtual voting. So if I could go down my rabbit hole just quickly from a technology perspective, as I know,
I'm sure there's going to be some technical people here, so we're going to appease the technically minded people, which myself included. We'll try to go not for too long, so everyone else will have some time to absorb some info. But let's do it. Let's go and chat a little bit about more of the details.
Yeah, certainly. So that first innovation of gossip about gossip. Typically, when nodes communicate with one another, they use something called the gossip protocol, which is that my node would tell yours, Paul, that this transaction has happened at this point in time. In the context of Hedera, not only do they gossip about the existence of that transaction, but they gossip about the whole history of transactions of which they're aware at that point in time. So what that means is that you and I can develop a shared version of the truth far faster than any other algorithm because we're sharing that additional information, that gossip about the gossip as well. Now, if you know what I know and I know what you know, then that enables that second core innovation, which is virtual voting, meaning that we can more efficiently come to a consensus on what the timestamp of a given transaction is. So the net of those two core innovations is that you have a consensus protocol that is performant, can process, again, 10,000 transactions per second today in a matter of seconds, and does so with a sustainable energy model. But one of the most important features I mentioned or didn't mention intentionally is that at no point in that consensus process is there a delegation or a leader election or a random selection of a leader that often we see as one of the compromises in decentralization for consensus. Said another way, every node participates in every round of consensus. There's no one or small group of parties that you're relying on for ordering of transactions.
Got it. So all the nodes, and how many nodes are there on the network that are allowed to participate in this consensus model?
Yeah, so today I believe it's just over 20 some odd council members. Companies like Google, IBM, DLA Piper, Shinhan Bank, Standard Bank, all across the globe. And that initial number will grow to about 39, which is the number of council members at any point in time. Now, that's just the start. As I mentioned, over time, KYC'd and eventually permissioned node operators would be added to the network, of course, at the direction of Hedera in their roadmap and their governance model. But certainly we at the HBAR Foundation are excited to see how a larger community of node operators is going to be, onboarded and able to support that network over time.
Got it. And so we talked about, making sure that the council members, which are basically the validators, are distributed enough around the world. So within those 20, how many countries do you think are represented within the 20 different council members, kind of representing that distributed nature?
Yeah, I don't know the number of countries off the top of my head, but I believe right now it's every continent aside from Antarctica. And I've heard some entrepreneuring community members are going on a hike soon, so maybe they'll put it down. No, I'm just kidding. But it is really diverse representation from Europe, APAC, Africa, North and South America, which is quite exciting. And, for instance, Magazine Louisa, just on the payments and commerce side, that's a company who's really active in the e-commerce space in Latin America. And seeing organizations like that participating in council membership and recognizing the innovation this space is bringing is certainly really exciting for some of the growth ahead.
Now, you mentioned some pretty big names as far as, Validator's council members. I thought I heard IBM. What were some of those other names that you had mentioned?
Yeah, so Hedera, their team and company has done a great job at really recruiting and growing that number of council members. But it's from countries or companies from, North America like Boeing, IBM, Google, FIS WorldPay, multinationals like DLA Piper and Dentons, who are law firms, banks like Standard Bank and Shinhan Bank, even universities like IIT out of India, the University College of London, LSE out of London as well. So it's quite exciting to see the number of organizations that they're convening in that governing body.
So what is the, a lot of times people ask like, okay, well, should I mine Bitcoin? Should I mine Ethereum? They start looking at the financial model, the tokenomics, the cost and ROI of doing so. What does that look like with a council member? Because obviously you've got to run some software. You need some hardware to do so, whether or not it's your own hardware, you do it cloud-based or whatnot. But what is the rewards model for someone that runs a validator node and effectively is one of the council members? What is that reward model? What are they compensated in? How are they compensated? Do fees go to them, or are there block rewards? Just kind of the overall monetization model for these council members. What does that look like?
Sure. So when we look at the asset HBAR from a network perspective, it really fulfills two roles. One as an economic model and the other as a security model. So from an economic perspective, HBAR is used to pay transaction fees. So the hundredth of a penny it might cost to transfer HBAR itself, or a fraction of a penny to transfer another token. And node operators receive a share of those transaction fees based on usage of the network. But it also is there to really serve as a security mechanism in the network long term, where that consensus process, Hashgraph, is weighted or will be weighted by the holdings of HBAR by each of those participants in the consensus process. So that's really the state of affairs today, where nodes earn through transaction fees and leverage HBAR for staking in the consensus process. But when we think about our objective at the HBAR Foundation, especially being independent of Hedera, we want to grow the broader awareness and economy around HBAR. That could be things like supporting projects who are creating yield opportunities with HBAR for holders, or creating new payments applications, whether that's from a retail or an enterprise perspective. So although that list right now for HBAR's use on the network is those two items from a protocol perspective, when we think about the HBAR economy built on top of that network and enabled with this asset, the use cases really proliferate from there. And certainly at the foundation, that's what we're most excited to help support and drive in the ecosystem.
Got it. So clearly transaction fees, the node operators get a portion of the transaction fees, which is pretty common across many cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and whatnot. Is there an issuance that is also given to node operators? That's probably something that many people would ask. A general issuance aside from fees, similar to how Bitcoin and Ethereum just create new currency over time. It goes down over time, but there is a currency created and then issued to, and on their networks, the miners. But on Hedera, is there some equivalent or type of a reward?
Sure. So HBAR was initially minted with a supply of, I believe, 50 billion tokens in total. And that's really a fixed cap in the number of tokens. So it's not inflationary like you see from other cryptocurrencies. And that community treasury right now, or that council treasury, I should say, is governed.
Hello? Oh, I think we cut off for just a little bit. Don, you back?
No problem. Yeah. Can you hear me now?
There you go. Yep. Yeah. Hear you just fine now. Wasn't sure if it was me or if it was you, but let's just take it from like maybe 10 seconds ago.
Perfect. So Hedera initially minted those 50 billion tokens, which were really at the direction and control of distribution by the council members. So node operators don't get new tokens, but they help govern how that treasury is managed. So the council, for instance, gave... Did I lose you?
Nope, I'm still here.
Great. So that council is what gave the initial funding to the HBAR Foundation to support ecosystem growth, adoption, and awareness of the technology as a whole.
Got it. Oops, still there?
I am, yep.
You are. I think we fell off on just the video recording that we're doing on the side. But got it. So there's purely a fee reward. And so kind of doing some quick off-the-cuff calculations, we're looking at fractions of a penny per transaction, and you have about 20 different validators. What is the typical cost to be a validator or a council member on the network? Have you guys calculated that out? Just in preparation for all of you out there that maybe in the future might want to become a council member and contribute to the network and validate transactions. What is expected to be that cost? I know for other networks such as like EOS, it's almost a full-time company that you'd need to be a validator on the EOS network. What does it look like for Hedera?
Sure. So I'll admit here, I actually, especially being independent of Hedera with the HBAR Foundation, don't know off the top of my head that cost. But from a really a practice perspective, I believe it's designed to be, in line with traditional cloud infrastructure where it's not overly burdensome to participate. But one thing I'll mention on that economic model, you called out correctly that there's, a fraction of a penny in revenue per transaction. That's really because Hedera is designed to support those use cases which are high volume, whether they're financial markets, payment systems, couponing and retail systems, let alone the broader DeFi, sustainability, and other use cases in both the crypto and enterprise space driving adoption.
Yeah, I was doing kind of an off-the-cuff calculation here. Like, if you peak at about 10,000 transactions per second with, a tenth of a penny per transaction, that's $10 a second in fees that you're effectively generating, times 60 seconds, and you're generating, what is it here, $500 per minute. So you can see that the revenue can really start to ramp up when you start to calculate out what you can do in high volume. And that's always been one of the big debates in the cryptocurrency ecosystem. I was in the middle of the block wars back when the block size wars during Bitcoin Cash, where some people said, oh, well, we're just simply going to have higher fees and just fewer transactions. And others said, well, you can sustain the security model by having a lot of transactions with much smaller fees. And that's definitely the direction that HBAR has gone down. And it's true. If you can do a lot of volume, it's kind of the same philosophy with eyeballs on the internet, right? You offer a service for free, but if you get enough eyeballs, you get millions and millions of eyeballs. You can monetize fractions of a penny of each one and actually build a very, very sustainable business model. So I could see that just on off-the-cuff calculations in charging a tenth of a penny. And I think you said it was like 100th of a penny. That the fees typically are. Was a tenth or 100th of a penny that people can expect to pay?
Sure. So it depends on the service being used, where something like transferring HBAR itself is going to be the cheaper of those two. I believe it's 100th of a penny. Yeah. And then transferring something like a stablecoin issued on Hedera would be a tenth of a penny, as an example.
Got it. So similar to Ethereum, where transferring a token is effectively a smart contract operation, which is going to cost a bit more. I presume it's something along those lines. And in that regard, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the support for things such as smart contracts and programmability in HBAR and how that differs or is similar to something like Ethereum, which a lot of people are familiar with.
Sure thing. So on top of that consensus algorithm we talked about earlier, Hashgraph, Hedera has built a set of modular and really accessible services that support the use of DLT custom for a specific application or solution. The three primary services are the consensus service, the token service, and the smart contract service. So to define each of those quickly, the consensus service essentially provides an API for ordering transactions or messaging between different participants. So whether you're providing a proof of a temperature recording for a COVID vaccine, like Everywhere is doing, you can prove and verify that data by submitting and generating a verifiable proof through the Hedera consensus service. So it's a great way to bring people closer together with an easier mechanism for establishing that shared version of the truth. Now, the second service is the token service. And here it's a bit different than how it's implemented on Ethereum. where instead of needing to program a smart contract to create a token, you can deploy your token natively to the network, where it acts almost as an asset or cryptocurrency similar to HBAR. The token can be defined to have rules like decentralized supply management, custom fees for the token, but because it's implemented natively, gets those same benefits around performance and low cost that we talked about for the network as a whole. It also means things like atomic swaps become trivial, where you can swap multiple tokens between multiple parties at a given point in time. And really, we've seen drive a lot of usage, whether in the CBDC, retail, or payment space as well. Now, the third and final service, which is, I think, from my perspective, what's most exciting to me about the Hedera roadmap, is some of the improvements coming down the pipe to the smart contract service. This version 2 of this service would essentially enable any developer running on Ethereum today to easily deploy their Solidity smart contract to Hedera and benefit from that sustainable, performant, and cost-effective operations compared to especially networks like Ethereum. So those are the three kind of primitives: the consensus service, the token service, and the smart contract service. And we've seen all kinds of applications being built in the ecosystem with those core capabilities.
Wow, so the smart contracts on Hedera can actually be just straight direct ports of people writing Solidity smart contracts on Ethereum. Is this basically an EVM compatible chain, or are they, maybe this is more of a technical question, but is it an EVM compatible smart contract layer, or are people taking Solidity code and then using custom tools that compile it down to what works on the Hedera network?
Sure. So it's not exactly one-to-one. Today, this smart contract service is implemented and is EVM compatible, but has limited performance and scalability and can't integrate with Hedera token service tokens. But with an improvement that Hedera announced just the other week, you can have a more performant, more efficient smart contract system that is still EVM compatible. That isn't going to be exactly one-to-one, but it's going to be essentially a full set of Ethereum and Solidity opcodes that you can now deploy through a smart contract onto Hedera.
Got it. So I know I'm I'm a big fan of DeFi. I use it myself, not so much for just the casino roulette, but for actual financial services, especially taking out loans with my cryptocurrency. I've been a fan of the Aave platform. What would it take if someone's got a DeFi platform, say on Ethereum? How much engineering work do you think it would take for them to port that and get that up and running on the Hedera network?
I think the hope really of the Hedera team and with adding this feature is that it now goes from, essentially a new stack to now being something that you can configure and deploy in a matter of days, if not hours, depending on how complex. So I think, especially on my end at the HBAR Foundation, we're really actively looking to support and drive some of those projects deploying to Hedera to build that DeFi ecosystem in the crypto space. We'll also see things like bridging solutions and other connections to the broader crypto economy that make those types of applications and yield opportunities easier to access. And this feature by Hedera is going to be a really great enabler for that. But
the bridging solutions, we're definitely seeing achieve a lot of popularity because it is a cross-chain world, or I guess in the case of Hedera, cross-network world. And so we're needing those to really be able to bridge assets that people have and hold, but want to be able to use on different networks. So sorry to interrupt. I wanted to mention that definitely a hugely valuable piece of the ecosystem. But sorry to interrupt. Continue on with what you were saying about the bridging.
No, I couldn't agree more. So we share that excitement. But one other area I wanted to call out is that many of the users and applications on Hedera are also looking at some of those, let's say, primitives or concepts that were proven with DeFi and exploring how these can be provided or applied to new use cases for new industries. So another great example is in the sustainability space. So whether it's tokenizing something like a renewable energy credit or an offset, and supporting the financial market around that asset, they're leveraging those, like I said, inspiration points behind the likes of a DeFi application or an AMM like Uniswap to now apply to and support this new type of industry and financial market and sustainability.
Got it. So I want to dive into probably one last aspect that we get asked by users pretty frequently, which totally understand if there hasn't been a focus, as most chains have not had chains and networks have not had a focus on this at all, with a very few exceptions. But where does the HBAR network, Hedera, stand with respect to anything on the roadmap for privacy? Is that anything that has been at all looked into, and how to accomplish that, especially in the smart contract world, which is a big challenge?
Sure. So this is an area where the community, I think, has really stepped up around Hedera to start proposing and coming up with some great ideas and potential solutions. So just as background, Hedera really drives its roadmap through something called the Hedera Improvement Proposal Process. That's a public way for people to come up with new feature requests, actually implement new features and contribute them to the network. And so we've seen some Hedera improvement proposals be created to do things like apply zero-knowledge proof methodology towards credentialing on the Hedera network. So some of those features are still early, and they're more focused on a, let's call it, privacy solution than network-wide privacy. But it's been great to see how the community's really recognized that need and begun to propose potential solutions for improved privacy, credentialing, and identity management on a public DLT.
Got it. And so for now, nothing there, but like I said, many other chains and networks don't really have much with respect to privacy above and beyond what Bitcoin and Ethereum have, unless they're more focused, such as Zcash or Monero. And in the smart contract space, there's just almost nothing. But good to hear that, hey, if you're in the Hedera community, you own some HBAR, start proposing. And so what would the proposal process even look like to get some of that stuff up and running? So there's the council members, which obviously have a large influence on the network. What is someone with just as a fan of HBAR, maybe they just hold some HBAR, what can they do? Is it effectively putting in a proposal that would help fund an effort, or are they voting in some way, shape, and form with their tokens? What does that look like to the end user that would like to see better privacy adopted?
Sure thing. As I mentioned, the roadmap, is governed by those council members, but is really designed to be fed by and driven by the community of users. So anybody can submit a Hedera improvement proposal in the Hashgraph GitHub repo. That is then something that other members can comment on, support, provide input to, and that really, I think, drives how the council then evaluates those items and prioritizes them for incorporation into the Hedera technology stack itself. So it's definitely something that, everybody's encouraged to do. We at the HBAR Foundation in particular are looking to help support those types of initiatives as well. So if it's, a HIP or just a standard that you're looking to have built, we'd love to talk to you about it and see what we can do to help make that a reality on the network as well.
Got it. So for other HBAR fans out there, if you want privacy or other improvements on the network, it sounds like the place to submit is on the actual GitHub of the HBAR Foundation, or is it the Hedera GitHub? Is there an official place to go?
Yeah, I believe it's called the Hashgraph, or it's a Hashgraph repo. And you'll see a whole host of different open source code, both the Hedera services themselves, other applications in the space, as well as the Hedera improvement proposal repo.
Got it. And is there a way that someone who wanted to add some functionality can actually get funded by the foundation for, say, writing code that may help contribute privacy into the network? Is that something that is feasible?
Absolutely. So our foundation is really focused on enabling usage, development on, and contribution to the Hedera network and broader ecosystem. So particularly around HIPs, as they're called, the improvement proposal, we love to support those whenever possible. We're certainly active in those community resources like the repo, but you can also reach out to us through hbarfoundation.org to apply for funding, and we can explore, what exactly we can do to help you be successful in what it is you want to build.
Got it. Okay, cool. So I know we've been chatting for quite some time. I want to make sure that we're able to open it up for any questions from the audience. So Issa, who I know is moderating, let us know if there are any questions that have been outstanding that we can fire away with.
Currently no questions, but if anyone just wants to raise their hand or request to speak, I'm happy to improve.
Let's see here. Any hands going up? Do-do-do. Nobody yet.
Just to prove HBAR to the moon, I believe has a question.
All right. Fire away.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Nice. Thanks for doing the spaces. Really happy to see HBAR added to the Edge wallet. I have a question about the tokens on Hedera network. Are you guys planning to add any other tokens in the future that are launched on Hedera network? Are there any plans in the future for that?
You're talking about as far as Edge's support of tokens on the Hedera network?
There's a jam token from TuneFM, similar to ERC20 tokens, and there's also a lot of NFTs. But the way Hedera network works, you need to associate tokens before being able to send to the account. I'm not sure if you guys have looked into that yet.
So we have looked into token support for Hedera as well as other blockchains. So for now, we don't currently have support for actually quite a few different networks. We only support the mainnet chain for now, but it's definitely on our roadmap to be able to have full broad token support on Hedera as well as other networks. And also make sure not limit it to what we choose to support. We want to make sure people can pretty much add any token that they choose that they want support for. We were, I believe, one of the first apps in the Ethereum network on mobile, at least, that let you add any arbitrary token that you wanted to hold, send, and receive. And we aim to do that as well with Hedera. Give us probably a quarter or two to be able to get all that support. And there is some refactoring that we have to do in the code to make sure we can arbitrarily support various tokens. One of the challenges that we have are currency code collisions, actually, is one of the weird challenges in the code in Edge is architected where a currency code is more than just what you show on screen, but helps us find specific parameters of a token. And currently, as it stands, we don't support the same currency code across different networks. So as an example, USDT, which exists on the Tron network, exists on the Ether network and Bitcoin network as well, although we don't support tokens on Bitcoin, supporting that across different chains actually causes a bit of an issue in a current code base, but we're hard at work in refactoring that to make that much more flexible. And once we do that, it really opens up full broad token support across different networks, including Hedera, because we won't have to worry about these currency code collisions anymore. So that is one of the blockers right now. But be aware, we're definitely hard at work, and so we want to get that support as soon as possible. But thanks for the question. Any other questions?
We do. I'll hand it over to Hashgraph Punks. Hashgraph Punks, did you have a question? I think you've been approved as a speaker.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I apologize, I came in a little late, so I hope my question is not already been answered by the conversation. But I guess the first thing would be each part of the moon asked specifically about tokens on the Hedera network, and for the association, there is a HIP 23 that's supposed to come out. It was supposed to be October 7th, but I think it's a little later. But just something to keep on your radar, Paul, as it will allow the association of tokens to be toggleable in the wallet. So you should have an ability to tell the mainnet that your wallet is allowed to just have certain slots open for NFTs or different tokens. So that should help the token association problem that HBAR to the moon
I'd mentioned.
pulled out.
Yeah.
And it's a great example of what Don was speaking about, which is HIP protocol proposals that work that come from the community.
Got it. HIP 23. Sorry, go ahead. Keep going. I'll make a note of it.
Yeah, okay. 23, yeah. I think that's the right number. Numbers are hard.
Yeah, I think you said 23. Yeah.
And then my other question would be, with your mass support of different protocols and your for you to add an NFT token, you have a strategy in which planning to network to be inside of it.
So strategy on how we normalize. Probably need a bit more clarification on that keyword to normalize different tokens. Can you give me an example or a little bit of clarification on that question? Because I definitely want to answer that, but I want to make sure I understand it. I see. Right.
We're trying to but because the network is so young, people are just kind of building what makes sense, what works, and then building a wallet that can see it. So
right. Yeah. Got it. So first of all, NFTs are not part of the support that Edge has. So one of our philosophies is that you build an app with a targeted focus, and the targeted focus of Edge right now is to enable people to buy, sell, and trade in a self-custody manner. We want to get people off a lot of the centralized exchanges that don't need to be there, that don't trade with the high frequency that those centralized exchanges really give you. NFTs fundamentally are parts of cryptocurrency that, to me, deserve their own high-quality app that really highlights the visual nature, the art nature of an NFT. And that's something that, while not currently on the roadmap, if we had the resource, we want to build a separate app that integrates very closely with Edge, allowing you to access the keys that you have for NFT-based chains and networks on a separate app that looks more like an art gallery than it looks like a financial trading app. And that's what kind of pains me, is I see NFT support in these apps that are very financial. It's almost like launching your Chase or PayPal app and then seeing artwork on there. The two are a bit of an oil and water mix. I want something that looks more like your music application, your Spotify, as opposed to your financial app, and be able to utilize all the real estate and UI and interface for NFTs and the different types of NFTs. Now, to answer the question about normalization, that's a bit of outside of what we think is our responsibility, and it's a bit tough for us to try to champion a normalized standard across these different networks. I think each network, though, for us, it doesn't matter if the standard is different on one network versus another. We have a plugin architecture for each network, and so each network can define its own schema per se. So we're not bound to that normalization across networks, so long as each network has, a small handful of schemas. There's not an explosion like I think you were mentioning. A lot of people are just throwing stuff on the network with their own schema as far as, this is the name of the NFT, here's a link to the JPEG, blah, blah, blah. So long as there's not a huge explosion of that, but there's a small handful, say, 1 to 3 different schemas, then we could abide by that. I think maybe Don has a bit more input on how you guys are standardizing the schemas, at least within the Hedera network. I'd love to hear if there is an initiative there to standardize the Hedera schemas for NFTs and tokens.
Yeah, yeah. No, thanks. I think one of the core drivers for the token service itself was to really make a token implementation sufficiently generic such that most of the ways the token is used can be configurable to easily integrate into a wallet, an exchange, a custodian. So the service is really designed such that to support the token from a wallet perspective, you can do it once and really support all tokens because of it. Now, the challenge, as is the case in many networks, many tokens, is that it's not about just the token on the network itself, but what comes around it, the metadata, the NFT information for the token. And that's where I think we're seeing the improvement proposal process and other community efforts like the one mentioned really helping to drive that standardization, or at least the framework for standardization, where you can take that primitive asset and now make it custom to a use case. I'm curious, though, one of the things that came up, Paul, I'd love to know kind of what is really exciting your user base in the crypto space. Do they, look to get exposure to these new tokens? Are they looking at things like NFTs long term? How have you kind of heard some of that feedback?
So NFTs definitely are asked of us almost like week in, week out, for sure. Even before NFTs became a word that was almost normalized within the entertainment space. And we haven't had the resources to build that app that I would be proud of. I think we could shove NFTs into Edge, within a few weeks, but it wouldn't be a product that I'd be really proud of. And so I think it's the challenge of not just adding support, but adding it in a way that I would be happy with. But one of the other things that is definitely coming down the pipe that is on our roadmap is extensive support for integrated DeFi. So DeFi today has been relegated to kind of a poor user experience of, hey, here's some DApp, on a website or an app that I download, and then here's my wallet, and then here's my exchange to go in and out of the assets that I need to in order to interface with that DApp. So Edge has the exchange part of that piece covered, but now using a DApp to, for example, take out a loan, right? I've done this. Our users, our staff has done this for their own personal financial reasons, but doing it is just a multi-step, multi-app process. That's one thing more on our immediate roadmap that we're looking to do, which is integrate right into the app, the ability to go click, 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 take out a loan, collateralize it with some cryptocurrency, and then deposit it right into your bank account. Right? So be able to use crypto without selling it, which is the big kind of tagline of crypto collateralized loans, which does go a bit more hand in hand. It's a financial product, goes more hand in hand with the current definition of what Edge is as a financial app focused with exchange functionality. It ties in that exchange functionality. So we're seeing that definitely. I know you'd mentioned it's going to be much easier to port over Ethereum contracts onto the Hedera network, and I think that'll be a big boon for being able to get some of these high demand products onto the network.
Sorry about that. I got cut off there for a second. Can you hear me?
Got it. Did people hear me, or was I muted this whole time? Half the time. Okay, got it. So did people hear me saying DeFi and talking about the fact that was kind of like the big angle that we're taking, kind of not so much on the NFT immediate, but definitely DeFi, crypto collateralized loans, leverage trading, shorting as well, things like that are what we aim to integrate directly into the app to really compete with the centralized exchanges and the offering that they have. But with them holding your money, you're gonna be able to do that inside Edge and still hold your own money, not put your money at risk. Cool.
I think that's very, very exciting, and hearing how it's all done, in a way that's empowering users to control their assets, control their money, I think is really exciting and a great demonstration of the whole vision of this space.
Yeah, no, I'm excited the space has actually gone in that direction. When I had first kind of got started in Bitcoin, I noticed that there was Bitcoin, and then there were a bunch of startups that got formed on top that were basically the financial services on top of Bitcoin, but every single one of them held people's money, whether loans, borrowing, lending, all of them. And I was like, this is kind of just rewinding back to what we had in banking. And the advent of smart contracts and DeFi really started to open my eyes to, wow, this really completes the picture. Not only do we have a money that can be globally accessible, now we also have financial services that are also globally accessible. And then the challenge being, of course, with Ethereum, hence the reason why HBAR exists, is the fact that it's globally accessible, but it's not accessible to the full tier of wealth. Right now, only people that can afford the huge fees on Ethereum are able to access that liquidity. And so getting that onto other networks that are far cheaper, more accessible is a big need of our ecosystem.
We'll have to do our next spaces on the different definitions of money and how crypto is starting to change that, because that's a personal passion area of mine for sure.
Yeah, it's changing it in a way, kind of in some ways redefining it to a new form that has not existed before, and in some ways bringing it back to what it originally was. And so it's both bringing back the old and creating a new at the same time, which is what's so fascinating about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. It's almost decentralizing the definition of money as well as the type of it. Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, and it's tough when you start to decentralize definitions. That becomes tough because then people don't quite agree as to what exactly a definition is. We've decentralized it, but we haven't fully achieved consensus on this one. The nodes have not come together or mind a block on the definition of decentralization. But cool. Right. We've got a few more minutes left. We can wrap it up with another question from the audience, if there still is one or two.
Awesome. I'm proving now. We've got Jim Nasser.
Jim, fire away.
Hey guys, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, good job guys. Paul, really great insight from your background, and Don, as always, you have lots of really good things from you. Just a couple of points and questions. One around this idea of kind of embedding privacy and privacy preservation. I think it's contextual to the use case. So we do a lot of work in healthcare, as an example. And part of our whole kind of MO is the idea of what is the Mendoza line, if you like, of transparency and auditability on a public ledger vis-a-vis kind of privacy preservation of underlying data. So that I think is important to understand the context, particularly in a B2B scenario. And then one thing I would say is, I think people conflate this idea of privacy preservation with decentralized identity. They're really not the same thing.
No,
right?
they're not.
There's a lot of identity, but again, to me, they're a little bit. There's a little bit short. They're not the same thing. So that's just kind of a little comment there. And I'm totally interested in your point of view about that. The other thing is kind of along the same lines around NFTs. I think particularly with protocols like Hedera, you're able to kind of reimagine what an NFT could be used for, right? So I think a lot of the, kind of what we coin as DRC 721 traditional use cases, that may be the iceberg. I think there's like a lot of B2B opportunities as well. Again, we do a lot around kind of health data type things, and there's kind of aggregate reporting and things like this, and that could be tied to NFTs. So I think this idea of like a wallet, I certainly all the bespoke user experience, but it's not just about the traditional use cases. Anyway, that's it. Good job, guys.
Well, thanks. So to comment on your, I actually have thought about those 2 points that you've mentioned quite a bit. I'll start in reverse with respect to NFTs, and I had mentioned that NFTs kind of need their own application, but really they don't need one. They need many applications. That one application I was referring to was really focused on NFT as art. And NFTs don't have to be art. Exactly like you had mentioned, NFTs have more use cases than just purely art and JPEGs and animations and videos and whatnot. But they at least need that. They need an app that highlights and really brings to the surface the fact that this is art and it's not a financial app necessarily. But take another use case for NFTs that I've thought about myself and worked with a startup many years ago, didn't quite push forward, but the use of NFTs from the viewpoint of events, tickets for events, where you can pay for and fund the creation of a concert. As a fan of, say, a Bruno Mars, say you're a Bruno Mars fan, his concerts come up, you could fund it by purchasing an NFT, which is effectively a ticket, and then resell that in a way as your investment. You've invested in this event, now you have a seat, and you can resell it at a higher price. However, do you really want that to be that ticket to be represented in an art-based NFT application? No, you want it represented in a ticket-based application where you can see, what does my seat look like at the different angles? What does it look like from an overview map of the specific venue that this event is going to be held at? All of that is more event-driven, which has some aspects of visual, some aspects of logistics. I should be able to then enter the event using this application, which is not exactly an art-based application. So the different use cases of NFTs, art being one, ticketing being another, and as you mentioned, there may be other use cases. I think each of those need a more dedicated app in and of themselves. So that's kind of one thought on respect to NFTs and their use case. To quickly chime in on your other question or comment with respect to decentralized identity and privacy, I fully agree, actually. Privacy, in a way, decentralizing identity both improves and makes privacy worse at the same time. So when you decentralize identity, you're now putting identifiable information on a public ledger, which is what was kind of the goal. But by doing that, you're making that information public. You try to de-anonymize it as best you can. It's like, hey, I own this public key. I have a private key to prove my identity. But what's associated to my identity that everyone can see? Can they see that I have a credit score over 800? Can they see that I paid my bills? Even though they can't see my name, they can still see aspects about me that I'm vouching for. And the fact that that's public is now worse, because that's information that I wouldn't be able to get about someone on a fully public ledger. However, it's not with a specific entity. It's public, so it's improved in the sense that you're not giving the power to a monolithic identity management service like the three main credit bureaus here in the U.S., but at the same time, you're making it worse that now everybody can see that information. Hopefully, it just doesn't have as much info about you. It has more broad info about you, more de-anonymized, but it is still more fully public. So there's a trade-off there, and that trade-off isn't purely you get better privacy. It's you get better ownership, but not necessarily better privacy.
Yeah, no doubt. I think we can talk about this a lot, and perhaps we should at some point. I think one thing, maybe an overlap between the use cases around NFTs is you could use NFTs, really as a means of, or as an evidence of authenticity, right? And as you have to think about, right? I think a lot of these are around scarcity and disinflation or arbitrage, but think about it as authenticity. Now you can kind of think about all the better use cases that are open up. I can open up.
All right.
But taking ethics aside, the idea of tying your back to basic status on NFT makes a lot of sense. So, just again, there's a lot of rich topics we can delve into. I think
Yep.
but
Probably another spaces chat one day. But cool. All right. I think we're just about wrapping up on time. Thanks everybody for listening. Any last thoughts, Don?
No, thanks so much on my end as well. I'm, like I said, very excited that our community, our economy's now got access, to HBAR through your application. So very excited to start that journey and work with you all.
Cool. So for anyone that wants to give HBAR a try, it is live in our app. Unfortunately, it's not in the app stores yet. We're just waiting for Apple and Google to approve it. But for those on Android, they can download an APK, which is a file that basically is the app. It's the exact same version that would be in the app stores. You can get it directly from our website at edge.app/app. Do that from your Android phone. You can download it and install it right onto your phone directly and not be at the privy of the different centralized app stores, which is one of the benefits of Android. But expect within the next day or two to have it also available directly from the Google Play and Apple App Store. And definitely send us your feedback. Give it a try. Check us out at edge.app. Let us know what you think and what features you want us to add with respect to Hedera and HBAR. So thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.